This allows us to create social groups, in fact, that can be strong and help protect us from things like being predated upon. If you're in a group, a large group, your likelihood of getting eaten by a creature drops significantly statistically because you've got a lot of eyes in a lot of directions that can warn of danger. But how does this sociality emerge? Well, parental investment is higher in most primates than other mammals and other creatures. They usually give birth to single offspring at a time and longer developmental periods, which build up a social creature in this offspring than just giving birth and saying, okay, you're on your own, have fun out there in this rough world. No, you bring up actually a social creature that learns social cues, learns how to rise in the top in the group, learns how to behave, and that actually helps with not just their survival, but their offspring's survival as well. So these are the things that all primates trend toward, and that is the thing that sets them apart from most other mammals. Now, amongst primates, there are some forms that resemble that are living today. These are called the prosimians, and these include lemurs, tarsiers, lorises. You probably know lemurs. It's a pretty common animal. They're actually primates. They're in our order. But they split pretty early on with the anthropoids, and we're part of the anthropoids. So the prosimians are the least similar primates to us, and lemurs and lorises are what are called strepsirrhines, and they have not completely lost their snouts, so they still have a little bit more olfactory sense. And these resemble some of the earliest primates, which were just beginning to split from other mammals at that time. And so it's not that they're not evolved, it's just that they have found equilibrium in their environment in places like Madagascar, which very well may have resembled some of these primeval forests in which primates emerged. And so we're least like these. Tarsiers are an interesting thing because they're prosimians, but they have a nose with a rhinarium, with a separation between the nose and the mouth, and a dry nose rather than like a dog, a wet nose, which you get in lemurs and lorises. And so they have a nasal and face like anthropoids like us, but their body types are more like a prosimian. Now, when we get into anthropoids, there are two infraorders. These are two subdivisions of anthropoid, which are what are called the platyrenes and the catarrhines. Now, simply put, the platyrenes means flat-nosed, and the catarrhines means sharp-nosed. And the flat-nosed platyrenes are exclusively now New World monkeys. So these are North and South American monkeys. Those are the platyrenes. The catarrhines are Old World monkeys and apes. So the Old World monkeys. A little bit of a side note here. When, in the 19th century, when anthropologists were first starting to use evolution and try and understand the origins of humans, they were already speculating about where would we look for human ancestors? Where would we look for fossils of humans? And there was a split of opinion, difference of opinion. And I'll come to this in later chapters as to whether we should look in Africa or in Asia for the origin of humans. As it turns out, Darwin was correct. He was guessing, but he was correct that it was Africa where our ancestors come from. But there was a good argument to be made that we might look to Asia as well. And I'll come to the reasons for that at another time. But what I want to point out here is that already in the 19th century, before genetics, before we knew anything about that, we had already eliminated the platyrrhines from consideration, which means we had eliminated even the possibility that we should look in North or South America for human origins. And the reason for that is because of our teeth, largely. Now, platyrrhines have a certain type of tooth formation, which is, well, I should say we have a certain type of tooth formation. That is to say that if you divide one half of our upper or lower teeth, you start at the one of your front teeth, which is an incisor. And you have two of those, and so you have two incisors, and then you have a canine, which is your sort of fang right next to it, that sort of sticks down. It doesn't go very much farther than any of your other teeth, but it's a little bit pointed. It's a different type of tooth. And then you have two premolars, and then you have three molars. And this is what we call the 2-1-2-3 dental formula. Also, our molars on the lower portion are what are called the Y5 pattern. The two premolars and three molars, that's five teeth, have a sort of a Y pattern to them. If you look at your tooth from the top down, it's sort of, there's a little Y groove, Y-shaped groove in your teeth. The only other place that you find this is in the apes, and those are only found in Africa and Asia. Apes are not found in the New World. They're not platyrrhines, they're catarrhines. And catarrhines are only found in the Old World, and platyrrhines are only found in the New World. Now, if all primates are related, how did they get into these different places? Well, this is where geographic isolation, remember I'm talking about speciation. This was an original uniform primate group that were all interbreeding with one another, started to get separated because the continents of Africa and South America started to separate. And the Atlantic Ocean now exists in between them, and after time these two groups became so separate that they went off in different directions and never came back together. So they became completely separate species, actually more than species, infraorders in fact. And so you had to choose which one did we come from, and it happens that the way the teeth are formed in the New World, the platyrrhines, is completely different from the teeth that we have, and we have similarities with the Old World catarrhines. So we're catarrhines. Now all of this was known in the 19th century, but we now have verified that by looking at our genetics and show that we are far more similar to we are catarrhines, we are not platyrrhines, and we do not share very many similarities. So okay, New World monkeys, I don't want to focus on too much, but they're interesting in their own right, and I'll let you read about it. There's also a video that I'll make available that you can take a look at. But it's really the Old World monkeys that tell us a bit more about our evolution. And Old World monkeys split into both terrestrial and arboreal species. And so the monkeys in the Old World, as opposed to the New World, which all remained in the trees, you have some that came down from the trees and started to live on the ground, terrestrial creatures. Arboreal monkeys are smaller than terrestrial monkeys, and terrestrial monkeys have what's called sexual dimorphism, which means that there's marked differences between male size and female sizes in anatomies and temperaments, right? That doesn't really exist in the arboreal monkeys in Africa and Asia. Terrestrial monkeys also have specialized adaptations in things like anatomy, their sort of psychological functions, and social behavior as well, that allow them to cope with stressors within terrestrial life. And also, the sexual patterns of terrestrial monkeys are that males are more likely to leave their group where they come from and enter into another social group. So it's the males that are moving around, and the females create the core of their of the social group, and males come in and actually fight for positions, but then they have to kick the other one out to get into that group, right? So this is the sort of thing like the alpha male has a harem of females, but they're constantly having to fight to keep that position. Now, Old World monkeys are in the superfamily Cercopithecidae. So the Cercopithecids are the monkeys. But amongst the catarrhines are also a superfamily called Hominoidea, which are apes. And that includes us. So we are also Hominoidea. This is the so-called great apes, which are orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, also humans. We're in that, and our fossils, the fossil ancestors that are the hominini, which I talked about earlier, which are extinct, and today gibbons and siamangs are also hominoidea. Now, apes, including us, are distinct from monkeys and other primates in the sense that they have larger body size, longer lifespan, they have longer intervals between births, they have a tendency toward upright posture. That is to say, most monkeys walk along the tops of trees, but if you catch a chimpanzee or an orangutan, they're swinging below. They're actually more upright posture, and that might have something to do with larger body size. And when they're on the ground, they tend to be, you can be knuckle walkers. And of course, we've moved away from even that, and we're upright posture. They also, apes have larger brains and the absence of a tail. So these are all things that set us apart. And also, we're included in all of those descriptions. So, like I said, gibbons in Southeast Asia, they mate for life. There's different characteristics and habits for each of these. They mate for life and live with their pre-adolescent offspring. Orangutans are sexually dimorphic, but they can be both arboreal and terrestrial, and they are the least social of all of the great apes. They're often solitary orangutans. Gorillas are huge. They have a huge sexual dimorphism as well. The male silverback is enormous compared to the females, but they have relatively stable social groups called troops. Chimpanzees also have some sexual dimorphism, but not as much as gorillas, and it's about the same proportionality as is in humans. We're also sexually dimorphic, but not hugely so. The difference between a male human and a female human are not as much as you would get in a male gorilla and a female gorilla. And it just so happens our closest living relatives are chimpanzees, so that makes sense that our sexual dimorphism is about the same. Chimpanzees are very well known by the primatologist Jane Goodall, very famous, who did a lot of the pioneering work in studying them in their natural habitat. And she saw that chimpanzee groups comprise about 50 individuals. But they also have a very complex social relationship with dominance relationships amongst them. And then there's a subdivision of chimpanzees, which are sort of pygmy chimps called bonobos, and they have slightly different behavioral patterns, where they're more female-centered than chimpanzee groups. They don't fight as much. They're more peace-loving, and they're more egalitarian, and they often use sex to avoid conflict. In fact, so they're quite sexual within their community. Now, let's take a break right there, and we'll come back to look at primate evolution and look at some of the past.